As we approach 1 year since the beginning of the civil war in Sudan, we are hearing reports of violence, rape, executions and famine. UN officials have said the conflict has brought the country into one of the worst humanitarian nightmares in recent history. It's believed that the war could trigger the world's largest hunger crisis. Medair have been working hard to keep their humanitarian programming going throughout this crisis. And to talk about that in more detail, Amy Follett spoke to Rachel Hirons, Country Director for Medair in Sudan.
Yeah, thank you. It's been just about 1 year. We're coming up on the 1 year anniversary, as you mentioned, since conflict broke out between two military groups. One is the SAF, the Armed Forces of Sudan, and the other is the Rapid Support Forces. Conflict kicked off on April 15th in Khartoum, the capital city, and it really spread across the country from there. There's been big outbreaks of violence and conflict in the Darfurs, where RSF is currently in control of most of the territory. And in Khartoum, the conflict really does continue to be very heated. In fact, the population a year ago was around 6 million, and it's now down to about 1 million, according to recent news. So people have had to flee en masse and not really knowing where they're going. They've landed in a lot of different displacement camps. So right now we're looking, as you mentioned, at the world's largest displacement crisis, particularly internal, but we've had 1.9 million people cross borders as well. So not only are people being internally displaced, but they're being displaced more than once. So they head to a new territory that they think will be safe, and then the war joins them there. So, for example, one of the second largest cities in the country, Wad Medani, became a conflict zone back in December, and many people had displaced from Khartoum to Wad Medani and were forced to flee again. We were traveling nearby at the time, and we saw just hordes of vehicles fleeing from that city as people were trying to take what they could in their cars, and were just jam-packed full of trucks, riding in the backs of the beds of trucks and other vehicles, just trying to get to safety. We're also really seeing, like you mentioned, outbreaks of violence against civilians, and something that is very concerning is the impact on women and children. There is some forced recruitment into military forces, but the impact on women is particularly difficult. Now, we also have some really good insight from social media monitoring agencies, and they're saying that the impact on women is also an impact on the men of the family who feel like they aren't able to protect the women that they are meant to protect. So there is a real trauma going on for the people of Sudan right now. What we have seen, though, that's been really inspiring, and this is where you can hear the emotion in my voice, is that there have been a lot of people who stayed behind to help, really. So while we, the international community, were evacuating, there were a lot of community-based organizations that were really stepping up. So they stepped up to do food kitchens in Khartoum in the middle of war zones. They've stepped up to provide services to people who are stuck in their homes. They've become shelters in different locations, in abandoned buildings, wherever they can find places that are safe. These community-based organizations are looking to serve and do mutual aid work where we aren't even able to be present. So it's been really inspiring to see people stepping up and filling the gap and serving their neighbors. I would just say that within that, there's a variety of people who've stayed behind. Not everybody can just flee to a new place. Sometimes your mother will say, no, I'm not leaving. And so you have to stay. Sometimes you are maybe a medical professional and you feel called to stay. So we're talking regularly with people in conflict areas who feel called to stay and serve the people that are also stuck in these conflict-affected areas.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your projects with Medair then in Sudan?
Yeah, we are currently operational in 3 areas and looking to scale up as well. We are working in a state called Blue Nile. It's a beautiful green area that has lots of rainy season, and it has, as you can imagine, the Blue Nile flowing through it. And it's been relatively protected there. We're doing health and nutrition activities to serve internally displaced people, refugees, returnees, and just generally people in need. We've also started up some activities in Khartoum, working remotely and supporting teams remotely there on the ground. We've been able to do a distribution of household goods to people in these group shelters, where they've had to flee from their homes and take shelter in these group locations where they're served by these community-based organizations. We've been able to provide them with some household goods, some tarpaulins, blankets, water canteens, and such. And then we're also operational down in another state called White Nile, where the White Nile flows through. And we're doing some cholera response there, as well as some distribution of household items, and some cash distributions as well. One thing that is becoming much more common in humanitarian work today is that we are able to give people cash and they are able to fill their own needs rather than us giving them a predetermined kit that may not fit their needs, and then they have to go out and exchange and barter and find what they need. We're able to give them cash and they're able to immediately use it to serve their needs. We're also really keen to scale up in the Darfurs, and we're looking at some local partnerships there where we can do good work to serve people in need.
So how important is your Christian faith in all of this, and how does it impact your work?
Yeah, it is a critical part of the work that we do. There's been so many times where you just don't know the next step forward. The operational environment is often one that has inexplicable blockages. You know what the blockage is, but you don't understand why it has to be there. So why is this person blocking the work that we want to do to serve people in need? Or why can't we get access to this trapped population? And that's where you really do have to take a step back and realize there's just a lot that is not in your hands. It's important that we as a team, we take some time to pray together, we do devotions together, and spend some time encouraging each other in our faith, because it can be very dark at different points.
So just finally then, how can we be praying for Medair and you guys at this time?
I think one thing that we constantly ask for in our prayers during our devotions is one that I would ask for your listeners to do as well. And that's just for God's guidance in the next steps that we have. We're constantly asking for the discernment of the Holy Spirit and the guidance and the wisdom to know how to move forward, how to overcome this particular blockage or that particular roadblock, and really how do we get to be the best position to serve people in need. There's a lot of people doing good work in Sudan. There's so much more need than there is actually the ability to serve or the funds to serve. So we are asking institutional donors, we're looking to governments for financial support, but we're looking to anybody who can provide financial support for this very, very forgotten crisis. There's a lot of needs in the world today, but we see that the needs are so high in this particular context, and people are really struggling to do the best that they can. So we ask for your prayers and support as much as you can.